Sam, an independent inquiry has found former High Court Judge Dyson Hayden sexually harassed 6 female associates during his decade on the bench. This got me wondering, does this type of thing go on in Canberra?
Heaps. I mean, firstly, it's now Dirty Dyson. I think that's what it's going to be referred to as from here into it. But what's so extraordinary here is, look, you had the Me Too movement in the US, and there was quite a lot of people, a lot of celebrities, a lot of famous people kind of got exposed. Australia's defamation laws are so tough that these things have largely been swept under the carpet. But what you've got here is a High Court judge, right, behaving in that way, an independent inquiry, and the Chief Justice of the High Court herself came out and actually apologised on behalf of the court to the 6 women involved. This is unprecedented. It's extraordinary.
Mm.
Wouldn't you say this is pretty disgusting behaviour, not just in politics, but across the board? And don't you think that we should be highlighting that? I mean, that little nickname that you had that we laughed at, I mean, it's kind of a bit sick that we're laughing at something which is so perverted, don't you think?
Well, look, I mean, to be honest, I think everyone's in a little bit of shock and surprise. It's terrible wherever it is. I think what this demonstrates is probably just how widespread a lot of these practices are and certainly, have been when when we're all the way up to the High Court of Australia. All the way up to the High Court of Australia. And look, politics isn't immune from this. Look, I suspect this is going to kick off another round of Me Too exposés, because I think a lot of things in Australia, because of legal action, because of defamation, because of the structures, a lot of things that were rumoured and talked about never really came out. There was kind of Don Burke, and then there was one or two other little things, and because of the Geoffrey Rush legal case, there was a fair bit of silence. What I think is going to be interesting is that the first round of Me Too in Australia certainly had a bit of emphasis on media and celebrities, and that's natural because that sells papers. But I think you're going to find a lot more of it about the legal sphere. And I wouldn't be surprised if in politics, look, I've been in Canberra, I've been around that environment. There was a lot of really kind of improper behaviour going on.
This is an exact reason, though, why you won't see a lot of female, women in politics, is because politicians are probably one of the worst, I would say, in this regard. Do you think that with the second wave of the Me Too movement is probably going to be a good thing? And is that going to allow us to see more females in politics?
Yes and no. It's certainly going to be a good thing in the long run. I think, unfortunately, what it does in the short run is that when a lot of women start seeing some of these kinds of stories, and that, unfortunately, it will dissuade them. But that's in one way. In the long run, that is a good thing to happen, in that the system has to clean itself up. Look, what you've got in Canberra is you've got a group of people, parliamentarians, politicians, who, let's face it, weren't necessarily the coolest, funnest people. These are the student politics people in high school and university, who are in another city, who are away from home, suddenly become celebrities, suddenly in Canberra and Canberra bars and whatever, kind of suddenly trying to relive their 20s and 30s. And there is an incredible inherent power disparity between a parliamentarian and either their own staff or staff or people from, the departments and that. And you've got probably the most innocent way of looking at it is like a Barnaby Joyce situation where he fell in love with his, media advisor. His marriage broke up. They're together now and they're having children together. That's their decision. That's probably a nice situation of that. But there's a lot of kind of sleazy, drunken behaviour with parliamentarians, usually men, hitting on young staffers and that, and trying to live out their youth. I mean, anyone who's been around that Canberra scene seen it.
Let me ask you a question on that. There was a lot of outrage when the Telegraph printed that front page story, Bundle of Joyce. There was outrage from people in the press gallery that this crossed a line and that should never have been printed. What are your views on that? Because I find that extraordinary.
Look, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. I mean, two issues. One is, let's not be naive, right? This happened in 2018 at the time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, to think that you're going to have a secret baby with your own media advisor and it's not going to be reported when you're the Deputy Prime Minister of Australia and they're on the taxpayer roll,
And you had voted against same-sex marriage based on your saying that it destroys the sanctity of marriage.
Exactly. I mean, the first thing, now look, and the whole idea and this notion that they had, and it was quite extraordinary. It goes to show the power of self-belief when I think Barnaby genuinely believed that it was never going to become a story, and it wasn't relevant, and it wasn't going to come out. Of course it was going to come out.
Why isn't it relevant, Sam? Why is this? But why are journalists saying, yeah, it's not relevant what they do in their personal lives? If there is one industry that does matter what you do in your personal lives, it's politics, because when you stand up, you're representing something. You're putting forward who you are as a person for people to vote for you. What you do in your private life is indicative to how you perform the role.
Yeah, well, Rob, I think what happens in Canberra, though, is there's a very complicated intersection of really complex relationships between that press gallery, which is captive to the parliament, and the parliamentarians themselves. You've got this weird symbiotic relationship where, on one hand, it is the job of the media to report on the parliamentarians. On the other hand, they're the people they're drinking and hanging out with all the time. And on the other hand, they're the people feeding them the stories. So you do have this kind of, it's a very kind of hazy, kind of sycophantic world where the people you're reporting on are the people you're with and are the people that are feeding you stories most of the time. And so you've got this whole balance that a lot of the press gallery try and do, which is they don't want to upset the parliamentarians too much, because if you're on the outer, you're not going to be getting those inside scoops. And I think the public see a lot of that and kind of can see it for what it is, which is, there's a club, right? And if you're in the club, you look after the people in the club. And I think the shock with the Barnaby thing was there was an example of when the club didn't protect itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who's going to take down these? Yeah, that's the thing I was going to say, is that who's going to take down these people if it isn't the journalists, though?
Exactly.
Well, look, I think what's interesting now is obviously the power of social media and that. I mean, what was I thought quite fascinating the past week, and again, this is a US example, is if you've been following any of that stuff on Twitter with Chris D'Elia, the American comedian, where one woman came out on Twitter to start with and said, hey, he's a bit sleazy. Like, look at this pattern of behavior. When I was 17, he was kind of sleazing on me. And again, say what you want. I don't know the facts. Everyone can judge this for themselves. But I think what was extraordinary wasn't that there was one story of one person at 17 saying, hey, this seems a little bit inappropriate. It was the fact that I think like dozen or 24 people within 24 hours came out and showed a pretty kind of sleazy pattern of behavior. I mean, say what you want. People can have opinions on whether one situation is right or wrong. When you suddenly get to a couple dozen, volume does matter. It adds a gravity to it. So I think the difference here now is that there's that world of social media. If you've been, sleazy or creepy or whatever, people can expose you. There's been a reluctance in the media, I think, because in part, don't underestimate how much what happened with Jeffrey Rush, that giant legal case, did to kind of, water down the appetite of the media to report on these things.
And we live in a world where the media don't have the funds that they used to have. It's a diminishing advertising market, so money is a problem and they don't want big, expensive legal bills. Robbo.
Yeah, Sam, I just want to go back to the Canberra Press Gallery situation the discussion, that we were having before. Is it not possible for a journalist to have kind of a Jim Acosta role? So we know Jim Acosta from CNN. He's always at loggerheads with the president, but he doesn't play that kind of game. Is it possible for that to happen here, or is it just too entrenched in that club culture?
Look, it's possible, right? But again, this is a much smaller pool. So in America, if you're the Jim Acosta, so Jim Acosta essentially has become the kind of the dignified opposition in the press gallery, or the White House press gallery, they call it, right, to Trump. Here it's a lot harder because you have to file every day. You need a story every day. If you're the opposition and you're the opposition day in, day out, you are not going to be getting drops. You're not going to be getting fed. You're not going to be getting that story. You're not going to be told the inside thing. You're not going to be asked to sit on the plane. You're not going to get the phone call from the Prime Minister or the senior minister. And we've seen that role, with different journalists have certainly played it. There were journalists at the Australian when Julia Gillard and Kevin Rudd were Prime Ministers who have kind of played that role. I think perhaps you could argue someone like a Peter Van Olsen at Channel 10 is quite combative with the Prime Minister. But you're not... No, you're not going to have what you have in the US because it's such a small pool, right? There is so few people. I don't know if the audience quite appreciates it. It's like, take a major network, right? A 7, 9, 10, ABC is slightly different, but a commercial network, right? You're looking at a press gallery team of what? When Parliament's sitting 3 people and a camera person, right? Maybe 2, maybe 1, It's such a small group of people. It's not what you have in America with CNN that we've got, you got a team of 40, so 5 of them can just be, loggerheads. That one person has to do it all.
Just
Sam,
before you go, I just want to ask you the question of how many centuries do you reckon that we're away from actually changing this culture? Because we talk about it a lot and we assume that it's going to happen, but sort of this pig dog, megalomaniac, misogyny behavior has just been still continuing itself. Like, can you just give us a bit of a, I don't need you to be a psychic, but can you just tell us when that's going to stop?
Well, I think a long time, and I think politics and the law, right, and also I think probably media as well, for that matter, is inherently attracts that kind of, unfortunately, I think draws those kinds of characters to it. And you're right, there is a kind of inherent kind of problem within that system. But we talk about it all the time, and women. I mean, it's four guys talking now. Let's be clear, right? But we talk about this problem about women in politics and engagement and that. And yeah, the structure. I mean, this is a structure, political system that was created by blokes for blokes several hundred years ago, and hasn't really reformed since then.
Good point. Yeah, good point.
Well, Sam, we always
good point.
appreciate your insight. Your chats are fascinating. We will see you next week on the Ben Robbins.
I will see you next week. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's the Ben Robbo Show.